Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. We welcome you to this online briefing here at Eurojust. We regret not being able to receive you here in the building. We would have welcomed you here, but we have many meetings at Eurojust today. We have the Consultative Forum of Prosecutors General, but this morning as well there has been a meeting of the Joint Investigation Team on alleged core international crimes committed in Ukraine, and we will brief you on that. We have here as speakers Mr. Ladislav, Hamran, President of Eurojust, Ms. Gabriela, Scutea, Prosecutor General of Romania, Mr. Andriy, Kostin, Prosecutor General of Ukraine, and Mr. Karim QC, Prosecutor at the International Criminal Court. We will issue a press release during the course of this briefing, and the recording will be available on YouTube afterwards. May I please ask you to keep your cameras off and stay muted, because that will improve the connection for everybody. After short presentations, we have the time for questions. You can use the chat button for that, and then we will handle the questions to the speakers. If you could then indicate as well who you are and which media you represent. Mr. Hamran, may I ask you to start, please?
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us online today. We are very pleased to welcome our partners from the member states, from Ukraine, and also from the International Criminal Court. We have another step towards fighting impunity for core international crimes, and today the Joint Investigation Team partners signed another extension, and we now welcome Romania in Joint Investigation Team. Eurojust very proudly support this Joint Investigation Team from the very beginning. This Joint Investigation Team started its activities already 3 weeks after the armed conflict started, and continuously is growing, but it's not only growing in its numbers, but also it's growing in its activities. Okay. This Joint Investigation Team met already 10 times. Eurojust organized 10 major coordination meetings between JIT partners to map out the best strategy for the investigations. And Eurojust has provided to Joint Investigation partners with legal, analytical, financial, and logistical support, but also technical equipment like encrypted mobile phones, laptop, and other modern encrypted communication tools. So we are welcoming today a new JIT member, Romania, and we are very proud that decided to do so. Now, on top of the Joint Investigation Team, we have 14 member states who decided to open their national investigation, looking into alleged core international crimes committed in Ukraine. Eurojust is aware of 20 national investigations in this context. So on top of the Ukrainian investigation, which is the most important investigation in this context, we have 20 national investigations. So Eurojust is confronted with this fragmented approach. We see many national investigations which have a different nature, different scope, different legal qualification, and this requires and calls for coordination. And we believe that Eurojust is very well placed to coordinate those national investigations and to discuss with our partners who is doing what, who has collected what, and what are the developments in those national investigations. So very soon Eurojust will step up its efforts for coordinating all these national investigations by developing a new database, which we call Core International Crime Evidence Database. In this evidence database, we will collect, or we will invite the countries to share with us their already collected evidence. And through this modern communication and coordination tool, we will make sure that there are no overlaps in investigations, that we avoid conflict of jurisdictions, so we avoid unnecessary competition, and we also make sure that our friends and partners from the ICC can focus on areas which are not investigated by national authorities, or they can further increase the partnership and collaboration with those countries which they have common interest. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is from our side the operational development. Eurojust is also very operational in the strategic part, and again, as a result of partnership and collaboration between Eurojust, Genocide Network, and the ICC, we published very helpful guidelines for civil societies and non-governmental organizations. And these guidelines are our recommendation how to involve the NGOs in documenting core international crimes. So the technical briefing which we had already showed how active NGOs are in this field. The meeting which we had was attended by 150 different NGOs. So this again illustrates the increased need for coordination, for partnership, for dialogue and collaboration. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Hamran. Ms. Scutea, if I may ask you to take the floor. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, President Hamran, for the honor of taking part in this press briefing. For us, it's the first day in the JIT framework, but we think that it's not something new. It's a new topic of a JIT, and I think I'm in consensus with you to state that Romanian prosecutors are quite qualified in using this instrument of cooperation within the European Union, and also taking into account the third countries which cooperate with the Eurojust. That's why, in this respect, we think that taking part in this joint endeavor in order to combat and to take perpetrators in front of a court when it comes to international crimes, it's our duty as prosecutor, as neighbors of Ukraine, especially given the fact that our authorities, our government has faced a large number of refugees going through Romania, has faced the wounded people coming to Romanian hospitals, and that's why we have the duty to collect evidence in order to be properly matched into a structured investigation. I think that since March, our authorities and myself, we have learned a lot from the experiences shared by the member states, not only those who are already part of the JIT, but all the member states who considered opening an investigation based on the universality principle. That's why we will act in a very determined way. We will act in a coordinated way with the Ukraine authorities, with Eurojust and the parties of this JIT, and also for the first time being aware of the extraordinary, still unhappy occasion to work with the International Criminal Court. That's why I will only state our office's commitment in order to actively and efficiently participate into this investigation, and we will hope that we will have enough means and resources to identify the perpetrators and to bring justice to its very core aim. So thank you for the opportunity of speaking to all.
Thank you. And I just recall that my first international contact from the day I started my office in the Prosecutor's Office of Ukraine as a Prosecutor General was with Prosecutor General of Romania, with Gabriela Scutea. And this is the historical fact, and we at that time we also discussed the issue of joining of the Office of Prosecutor General of Romania, joining our joint investigation team. And I immediately expressed our full support to this idea, and grateful for all of the efforts which the Office of Prosecutor General of Romania is already taken. And today I'm grateful for you, for your real commitment to bring justice to Ukrainian people and to be in our joint investigation team family. And of course, as always, grateful to the president of Eurojust, to Ladislav Hamran, who is really taking a leading role in coordinating of the efforts of joint investigation teams. This is really very important for Ukrainians, since we all understand that taking joint actions and documenting war crimes in a proper way, as it is prescribed by criminal procedural law, respected in each of the member countries of JIT, will give us an opportunity to not only to collect, to store this evidence, but also to use them either on the level of national investigations opened by 20 countries, as Ladislav already mentioned. Also with the ICC, the Office of Prosecutor Karim Khan, who is really very close, and he is really on the front line of delivering justice on international level to all of the Ukrainians who suffered as victims of war crimes committed by Russia on Ukrainian territory. And also could be used in Ukrainian courts by our prosecutors and investigators, since we all understand that practically all of the war crimes committed on Ukrainian territory by Russian Federation are investigated and are prosecuted in Ukraine. We have cases for every incident committed in Ukraine, for which we have an evidence of whether it was committed, like hit of missile and destroying of civilian infrastructure, killing civilians and civilians wounded, the crimes related to inhuman treatment of our people, including torture, rapes, and also the crimes which are committed outside of Ukraine. You know that the number of Ukrainian people forcibly deported, mainly women, elderly, and especially children, is huge. While we fix only a piece of this figure, because at the moment, if coming back to children, less than 8,000 incidents are fixed by our prosecutor's office, because we have no other information which has been reported. And we understand that this number is at least 10 times more, as many researches made on the international level provide. So we all understand that crimes committed by Russia in Ukrainian territory, it's not only about crimes against Ukrainian people, these crimes are against the civilized world, and they commit them not only, as I mentioned, on Ukrainian territories, they proceed to commit them even outside of Ukraine. I also would like to mention the inhuman treatment of the prisoners of war, Ukrainian prisoners of war, the filtration camps, etc. So we all understand that this huge number of crimes, they are trying to spread whatever they can, and the only possible way for all of us to make them punishable and to avoid any impunity is to be together, is to be united, and to coordinate our efforts in order, once again, thank you for what you mentioned, Ladislav, to avoid overlapping and to use all our resources in most efficient way. And at the end of the day, to show to everyone, not only to Ukrainians, but to all of us, that in this war of the total evil against the civilized world, only being united and taking joint efforts, we can win. But I believe that we win because I understand and I feel now the commitment of all of my fellow colleagues, member states of joint investigation team, of the team of Prosecutor Khan, of all of our partners who help us on the ground, who help us with their expertise. This is really very helpful, and this really gives us a result. Just few words about what's happening now on the ground. Only at the start of this week, on Monday, Russia launched a massive missile attack, sent more than 112 missiles on Kyiv, Zaporizhia, Lviv, Ivano-Frankivsk, other cities and towns all over Ukraine, which killed at least 17 people and injured 93. These shelling have no military purpose. The goal of Russia's deliberate attacks is to cause civilian deaths and to destroy civilian infrastructure. By shortage of electricity and heating, provoke humanitarian catastrophe. Coupled with the intimidation tactics against civilians, it's a classical act of terror prohibited under international law. For this reason, we believe it's right time to evaluate and determine Russian Federation as a state sponsor of terrorism. Collection of evidences of war crimes in the recently deoccupied Kharkiv region and part of Donetsk region and Kherson region is underway. Mobile investigation teams have been deployed, so it's our taking out the experience of investigating of mass atrocities in Bucha, Irpin, Borodyanka, and other towns near Kyiv, which were, which we knew only a few days after Russian troops were kicked out from Kyiv, and this was really shock for everyone. Now we are more prepared and coming to the territory which is liberated. We have mobile investigative teams on the ground. So, for instance, in Kharkiv, we decided to have 28 mobile investigative teams which can in parallel work in different places. So they include prosecutors, they include the investigator from State Security Service, they include police, and they include the forensics. So for them to be a full set of specialists which can document all war crimes committed in proper way. These efforts are supported by our international partners. We remember that law enforcement teams from Lithuania and Poland have been active in Ukraine under the auspices of the joint investigation team with respect to the crime of aggression. Slovakia has provided support through 2 missions of experts, and deployment of third one is currently being agreed. French investigation and forensic teams has been working in Bucha and now are working in Kharkiv region on examination of bodies discovered at the site of a mass burial in the town of Izum, and at the site of the shooting of convoy of civilian vehicles near the village of Kurilivka, Kupiansk district. You probably know, so 24 people were found killed in 6 cars. They're all civilians, including 13 children and 1 pregnant woman. Today was reported, found a new body of a very old woman who tried to escape. Probably she was wounded, and she probably somehow tried to escape, and they found their body in the wood nearby, 300 meters from the place of these cars. These vehicles were shooted, and all of the people inside were killed. The scope is immense. Extensive amounts of evidence have been collected at this time. So testimony of witnesses and victims, records of investigative actions, conclusions of experts. On the deoccupied territory of Kharkiv region, 11 burial sites were discovered, one of which is a mass grave, as I mentioned, on the territory of Izum district. So far, 457 corpses were exhumed. 447 on the territory of Izum district, 6 on the territory of Chuguyev district, and 4 on the territory of Bogodukhiv district. This is all Kharkiv region. When examining the corpses, mine and explosive injuries, gunshot wounds, stab wounds, fractures of limbs and ribs, and cut-off body parts were found. 2 mass graves were also discovered on the deoccupied territory of the town of Liman, Donetsk region. In one of them, there were servicemen of the armed forces of Ukraine. In the other were the civilians. Approximately 154 people were buried there, 124 civilians and 30 servicemen of the armed forces of Ukraine. On the deoccupied territory of the town of Svatohirsk, Donetsk region, 1 mass grave with civilians was discovered, where 7 people, 6 women and 1 man were buried. While the many cases are under investigation, the evidence of illegal detention and torture of civilians, illegal deportation, and numerous shelling of civilians' objects have been revealed and recorded. Due to the speed with which armed forces of Ukraine liberated the settlements of Kharkiv region, parts of the region of Donetsk and Kherson regions, the Russian army did not have enough time to completely and quickly destroy the evidences of the crimes that were committed. At the same time, these territories were under Russian occupation for a long time, and therefore this period was enough to at least try to hide and destroy traces of war crimes. However, teams of investigators, prosecutors, and forensic scientists are working tirelessly to record all available evidences. I believe that we need to be together, dear colleagues and friends of Ukraine, to be united to ensure justice for all of the victims of war crimes, to prove to Ukrainians once again and to all of us that rule of law exists, that international law exists, and that rule of law prevails over the rule of force. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kostin. Mr. Khan, may I ask you to take the floor now?
Thank you so much. The law can pierce the fog of war. It requires effort and it requires unity. I couldn't agree more with the Prosecutor General of Ukraine. I'm extremely grateful once again to President Ladislav Hamran for his leadership and ability to convene under the umbrella of Eurojust so many expert national authorities to discuss something that is common to all of us, which is our humanity. It's an important occasion to welcome the Prosecutor General of Romania, becoming the 7th country today to join the joint investigative team. In times of difficulty, when the odds are so great, when the trauma is so widespread, we need to come together and be bound by something larger than our simple momentary national interest. That is the law. Some of the individuals that are watching will ask the question, is this all talk? Well, time will tell, but we are moving with a speed that I think is vindicating the need and the justification of the collaboration that started very early on. It was still March when the joint investigative team was created. And as far as the Office of the Prosecutor is concerned, from the very first moment, we were delighted to join as a participant at this joint investigative team. In May, and since May, the Office of the Prosecutor has had a continuous field presence in Ukraine. In May, we had the largest ever deployment of 51 staff of the Office of the Prosecutor that went to Ukraine. That was composed of permanent staff and also a new model with forensic specialists from the Kingdom of the Netherlands. That rotational model of short-term secondments to the office has since been joined by Belgium, and I think 6, 7, 8 countries are also in the wings to try to help us do our job, to work with the Ukrainian authorities to make sure that truth is not the first casualty of war. But in 3 weeks' time, we will have an even larger deployment, additional people in the field. You know, we all have seen in the human rights community a lot of attention to human rights defenders, those brave souls that speak up against tyranny and violence and oppression and persecution in so many different situations. It's my view at this moment that added to those ranks are the not just human rights defenders, but the actual investigators and prosecutors that are operating in the midst of a battle. I have seen firsthand so many brave Ukrainian men and women in Kharkiv, in Bucha, in Borodianka, that are almost first responders, that are there, and then they go to where the missiles strike, they go to where the allegations are, to try to collect and preserve evidence. And I am actually tremendously proud by members of my office. Last week, they were in Izium, working with the Ukrainian colleagues to get to the truth of what happened. This week, they're in bunkers with Ukrainian children and men and women as missiles rain down on people. People who have a right to live without terror, who have hopes and aspirations, who are not politicians, who are simply trying to go around with their life. And I think this moment, if it is not to become a talk shop, it requires us to realize that the law is non-political and it works together across borders based, as I've said, on our common humanity. And this new common front of legality, the fact that 43 states, 1/3 of all state parties, worked in record time to refer the ICC, referred the Ukraine situation to my office, the fact that we are here shoulder to shoulder with many different partners, not just those on the table, those that are waiting in other rooms for the meetings to continue, is an eloquent testament that this is not all talk. There is a deliberate determination that in this very perilous moment in which we all breathe the blessing of breath, we need the law to be felt, and we need to send a clear message that should have echoed and should resonate even louder. It should resonate since Nuremberg, but it needs to be, the volume needs to be increased. That there is no statute of limitations for war crimes. There is no tolerance, there is no possibility for crimes that may constitute genocide or war crimes or crimes against humanity to be committed with impunity. The space in which those that feel that they can grab what they want, kill when they like, rape with abandon, and target the most vulnerable, children, who are so terribly affected by conflict. The law has to be with them, has to be felt by them. That is our challenge. That is our responsibility. And that's what we are trying to do together. It requires a partnership, and it requires determination, resilience, and stamina. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Khan. Mr. Hamran, you would like to round up, perhaps?
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, I keep saying that this armed conflict will be, or already is, the best documented armed conflict in history of mankind. The amount of evidence, the number of investigations, number of civil societies operating in Ukraine and beyond calls for partnership, collaboration, and effective coordination. We also just heard from Mr. Karim Khan that documenting core international crime, especially when the armed conflict is ongoing, calls for determination, patience, resilience, and stamina. I do wish that the national and international efforts in documenting core international crimes in Ukraine sets an example for any armed conflict, whether present or future. So thank you so much for your determination, for your professionalism, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Mr. Hamran. Thank you to all the speakers. We would have time for questions if you would have any. Please use the chat button. We see some coming in. The press release on the fact that Romania has become a member of the JIT has just been published on our website, and you can check it via social media channels that we have. And of course, we will send it to all our media contacts. And we have a question from Reuters, a question for Mr. Kostin. Can you see if you've already opened cases related to the missile strikes that started this Monday? Mr. Kostin, please. Are there already cases? Have you already opened cases related to the missile strikes that started this Monday?
As my fellow colleague and friend, Prosecutor Karim mentioned about his team on the ground in Kiev working or being in bunkers on Monday, Tuesday, our staff was also in bunkers and shelters during this massive missile attack, except those who came to document, to fix all these war crimes were committed by Russian Federation. So all of the hits of every missile, every drone, every damage of civil infrastructure, every person, Ukrainian, who was killed or wounded by this missile attack, all of them are documented and criminal proceedings were registered and opened. So I just wanted to say thanks for these brave, our brave colleagues, women and men, prosecutors, investigators, police officers and experts who came on the place of every explosion, every missile hit or drone hit in Ukraine during these days and documented all of these incidents.
Thank you. That was a question coming from Reuters. We now have a question from the Spanish news agency EFE. Also for you, Mr. Kostin. How many suspects of war crimes have been arrested so far in Ukraine, and how many were already convicted?
Thank you for your question. I always check because every day this amount is changing. We have indicted, or as we say, notified of suspicion for committing of war crimes today 186 individuals. Most of them, or the big part of them, are notified of suspicion in absentia, but this is for cases where we identified the perpetrators and then we don't know where they are, but we have this possibility. And I'm always asked, why are you doing this? But we have victims, and these victims are waiting for justice, and we can't just stop the case because we don't know where these perpetrators are. They are soldiers of Russian army or Rosguardia or private military companies. And when we have all information, all evidences, and identified these perpetrators, we inform them about suspicion, even in absentia. But we have part of war criminals who are notified of suspicion, whom we have in our possession. So as to 45 of these individuals, materials has been filed to the court consideration. So we finished investigation, and our prosecutors filed these criminal cases to the court. And we have already 10 individuals who has been convicted. So these all who has been convicted, these all we convicted in person. So we have already 10 people whom we convicted, and we have verdicts of court.
Thank you for this update. We have a question from Agence France-Presse for you, Mr. Khan. You say we are moving with a speed that I think is vindicating the collaboration, but this journalist of Agence France-Presse would like to know when we will see the first ICC charges and arrest warrants.
When the evidence is sufficient, because we don't operate to any other timetable other than our legal responsibilities. And of course, the credibility of this process requires me as the prosecutor of the ICC and my office to have the detachment, the objectivity and the thoroughness that is required to build a case that will be challenged and has to satisfy the burden of proof beyond reasonable doubt. So we are moving forward. We have focused, but I'll make announcements at the right time, which will be before, after the judges are notified.
Another question. Sorry, thank you. Another question for you, Mr. Khan from BBC. Will any Russian suspects detained in Ukraine suspected of committing crimes that will fall within the ICC's jurisdiction be able to be extradited to The Hague to face trial, even if Russia would object the extradition?
Well, this is a matter of cooperation with the government of Ukraine and the Prosecutor General and the judges, the independent judges of Ukraine. Certainly, if there was a need and under the complementarity principle, there was reason why those trials could not take place in Ukraine, whether it's because of some legal additional provisions that we have or not. I'm sure that we would get the cooperation from Ukraine, but otherwise Ukraine is also moving forward. But legally, yes, it's not. It wouldn't represent an obstacle to our jurisdiction.
Mr. Hamran, would you like to follow up on that, or? Okay, we would have time for one or two more questions, but we don't see any questions coming in. So in that case, we would like to thank all speakers and all of the media representatives who have joined online. We plan to do these kind of updates more regularly for you when we think there will be announcements, and I think we have a good update of the situation right now, 6 months after this JIT has started. As said, a recording of this press briefing will be available on our YouTube channel as soon as possible, and we have the press release out. If you have further questions, you can always mail to media@eurojust.europa.eu. Thank you very much for your interest and attendance, and thanks to all the speakers. Thank you.